This is the Nokia Lumix 640 and it's a Windows phone. So Windows Phone was released back in 2010, excluding Windows Mobile, which was an early version of Windows Phone. This version of Windows Phone was released back in 2010 and updated a number of times and then finally discontinued in 2017. Then it was declared a dead operating system by Microsoft back in 2020. And here it is today in 2023. So in this video, we're going to revisit Windows Phone, see what we can actually do with the operating system in 2023 and review it. And as always, if you do enjoy this video and you want to see more, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We have just hit 1,000 subscribers. It's absolutely amazing. So I don't even know what the next milestone is. Let's aim for 2,000 subscribers and we're going to aim for 30 likes on this video. Let's get on with it. So Microsoft had been making mobile operating systems all through the early 2000s with Windows Mobile. So this is what early Windows Mobile looked like. Hopefully in a future video we'll have a look into that. And then in 2010 Microsoft adopted the tile home screen design with the first ever Windows Phone. This first Windows Phone operating system was called Windows Phone 7 and it was released alongside Windows 7. And in many ways Windows Phone 7 was actually ahead of its time. And as you can see, the home screen was very aesthetically pleasing. It was made out of multiple tiles. The tile design on Windows Mobile 7 was actually very interesting because desktop Windows 7 didn't have any tiles. It wasn't until a couple of years later in 2013 when Windows 8 was released.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man.
And the desktop version of Windows adopted this tile design. So Windows Phone 7 was then updated to Windows Phone 8 at the end of 2012. And then a year later, it was updated to Windows Phone 8.1, which is what I'm running on this phone here. So even though Windows Phone was eventually discontinued, there is a lot of things that this operating system did right. So one thing this operating system did really well was the design. So I would say in 2023, this design actually still does look quite modern. And back in 2010, when you compare the tile design of Windows Phone to Android at the time, which was Android Eclair, I'll show photos of both of these operating systems on screen. As you can see, in my opinion, Windows Phone is a much nicer looking operating system, even though it may not be as functional as Android. Another benefit of Windows Phone was performance. Compared to Android, Windows Phone was able to run smoothly on much lower end hardware. An example of that is this Lumix 640. This phone is running on an old Snapdragon 400 and it only has 1 GB of RAM, but it still actually feels fairly smooth to use. Whereas if you tried to run Android on a phone with these specs, it would most likely be a laggy mess. There are also a few features that Windows Phone implemented before iOS and Android. One of those features being a system-wide light and dark theme. This wasn't implemented into iOS and Android until a couple of years later. Another appealing feature of Windows phones back when they were being released was the price. Windows phones were more often priced lower than equivalent Android and Apple phones. So you most of the time ended up getting more for your money with a Windows phone. I remember also being a fan of the design of a lot of these Windows phones. I think a lot of them looked very nice. So the question is, why did Windows Phone fail? Why did a nice looking operating system that ran really well on low-end hardware, why did it fail? And the main reason Windows Phone failed was due to lack of app support. So Windows Phone did actually come with a lot of Microsoft apps, such as OneDrive, Skype, and Microsoft Office, and it used the Edge browser, but there wasn't a lot of third-party app support. For example, you weren't able to get apps such as Instagram and YouTube for this phone. And it was this lack of app support that meant that people stopped buying Windows phones. And with less Windows phones being bought and used, less third-party developers were creating apps for this operating system. So that meant if you bought a Windows phone, all you were left with was a nice looking, smooth home screen with no apps that you actually wanted on your phone. So we're now going to have a closer look at this Lumix 640 Windows phone. We're also going to take a closer look at Windows 8.1, which is installed on this phone. So here we have the Nokia Lumix 640. So this phone was released back in 2015, so it's one of the later Windows phones. Its whole construction is made out of plastic. It's got a 16:9 5-inch 720p screen on the front. The screen is reasonably sharp, but nothing amazing. And viewing angles are quite poor compared to newer phones. It gets quite dim when you look at it off axis. This has a Snapdragon 400 inside it with 1 GB of RAM and 8 GB of storage. So specs wise, it was pretty low end even for 2015. But as you can see, Windows Phone seems to run pretty well on it. Scrolling around the operating system seems to be pretty smooth. And there's not really any frame drops on any of the animations. So a cool feature of a lot of these Windows phones is you can actually remove the battery. So the plastic back comes off and you can change the battery. So this Lumix 640 comes with an 8 megapixel rear camera and a front facing camera, and I only paid £12 for this phone on eBay used. So let's actually have a little bit of a closer look at the Windows Phone 8.1 operating system. So as you can see, this is the home screen. You can scroll up and down. Quite a nice little animation when you go too far up and too far down. At the bottom there's an all apps button, so you can press that and then you can scroll down all the apps that are installed on this phone. There is a back button like some of the old Android phones. There's a Windows button at the bottom that acts as a home button, and then there's a search button that opens Katana. So it comes with Facebook pre-installed for some reason, and then we've got an app store, so we're going to see if this app store actually works. So I have connected this to the internet, but I'm skeptical whether or not this is going to work because this operating system has been discontinued. Yeah, it says it's having trouble connecting to the app store. So it does look like the Microsoft Store on Windows Phone has stopped working. I'm going to have a look at the News app, see if it can actually connect. Nope, there's another error that's occurred, so that service has stopped working. Let's try Edge to see if we can go on the internet. So this is most likely quite an outdated version of Microsoft Edge. See if that works. So Google has worked. And then we're gonna try YouTube. We'll see if we can watch a YouTube video because there is no YouTube app on this phone. So scrolling on the web's actually fairly smooth. I've got no issues here. Keeps coming up with a security notice, I presume because it's an outdated version of Edge. So it seems to not want us to go onto YouTube without signing in. So we're gonna try something else. I think we have to go back to Google first. Let's search dog. See what comes up. Right, so that works. I believe this does support gestures, so I think you can swipe from the edge of the screen, and yeah, it takes you to the previous web page, which is very nice and does feel very modern. And it comes with a music app, radio, podcast, video. There's only 3.5 GB of storage left on this phone. There's not really a whole lot you can actually do with this phone. Look at this though, if we go into settings, scroll down to start and theme, and then look what you can do, you can make it light. The whole UI becomes a light theme as opposed to a dark theme, which is very cool. One pretty rubbish feature about Windows Phone is brightness. There's no brightness slider, so you've only got 3 brightness options, which is pretty poor from a phone, especially one that came out in 2015. And as far as I'm aware, you actually have to go into the settings to change brightness. There's no brightness toggle in the notification center. And yeah, the notification center is very basic. There's not a whole lot going on here. So one thing I am a fan of is the Lumia camera app. It does just look like a basic camera app. You can take photos. So if you go and click up here at the top, you now have manual control over everything, including focus, ISO, shutter speed, exposure compensation, and white balance, which is really cool actually. So this is a feature you don't usually see on a lot of modern phones, so it's really cool that you can do it on this phone. So I mean, even after using this operating system for about 10 minutes, I can kind of see why it was discontinued. Apart from this home screen, there literally is nothing to this. None of the apps work, and there are no apps on the App Store. So if you want to use this Windows Phone for anything other than just taking phone calls, it really isn't that functional. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that like button, and leave your thoughts on Windows Phone in the comment section below, and I'll see everyone in my next video.